Welcome to another episode here at Lightingbot. Boy, do I have something interesting today. Usually we have people visiting our stream and they tend to be within the same sphere. Today we have our first person who is into photography, but not just any photography. We're talking about fairytale photography and she's also interested in Photoshop. So we'll have a good opportunity to explore her skill sets and her thought process, and hopefully you guys and girls get something out of it. So please let us welcome Ruth to our stream. I do not know how to pronounce her last name, so that she can do on her own. Welcome, Ruth.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, it's Ruth Chornolutskyy. It's a hard name.
Oh, all right. What's the origin of your last name, by the way?
My husband's Ukrainian, so it's from
All right. Cool. Ukrainian. That's good. A lot of things is happening in Ukraine right now, I think, as well, right?
yeah, it's a bit of a dodgy place at the moment, so
What?
hopefully everything will be okay.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, he actually works from there, so he's like off work at the moment because he's like, oh, stuff's happening, and I'm like, oh, what? Panic. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on. But Ruth, so let's learn a little bit about you. Luckily for you, unfortunately for me, there's not a lot of stuff on LinkedIn that reveals a lot. So I do actually have to ask you a very basic question first. Uh, where did you study? Where did you live? How did you get started? And why do you do photography and photoshopping at the moment?
Well, photography is a part-time business for me, so I got into it about 5 years ago. I started doing wedding photography with my husband when he moved over here from the Ukraine. We decided to set up a wedding photography business, so that's how I actually got into it. And then I think it's about a year in, I started doing model photography and portrait photography, and I just kind of fell into this niche of fairytale photography. I didn't decide to do it any one day. I just started buying dresses off the internet, going to locations, and I don't know, it just grew from there, and it just came very naturally. You know, when people talk about finding a style, like, oh, I need to get a style, I just kind of fell into this style. I think it just comes naturally over time. It's what I like doing. It's what I like editing in Photoshop. So I just went with it.
It's fascinating because obviously, because I used to live in Norway as well, and was part of the photography community there, and we would go on walks to take photos, and there was proper photography. They weren't bad at any sense, but fairy tale photography. It's really is it because you like fairy tale stories as well? I mean, there has to be some unconscious. There's no unconscious reason to like why you pick fairy tale, or do you like fantasy movies, or I don't know, stories. I don't know.
I think as a child, like, I grew up on fairy tale stories. My mum used to read with me, and I used to draw princesses. I think every girl wants to be a princess, or maybe not. Maybe I just want to be a princess, but I was always interested in that. And I love girls in like big dresses, long hair, beautiful locations. It's just very magical for me. And I suppose I just still cling on to that childhood love.
Yeah, that's true. You have quite a few photos on your Instagram at RR Photographic. Um, so how do these people find you or decide to be taken photos of in a fairy tale? What's the process? Do they come and say, "Hey, I want to be some kind of tree and or I want to be a mermaid," or is it you who sit down and kind of brainstorm? What's the process you start with when you do this kind of photography?
It's a mix of things because obviously I run workshops for photographers. So some of the things are themed workshops that we think up for photographers. And other times people come to me on Instagram and say, I really want a shoot with your dresses in a nice location. And so then together we just kind of think up a theme. And sometimes I do stuff in my own portfolio as well, just because I want to do something like the Christmas shoot that I did at Christmas with the Christmas tree in my garden. That's just something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I just decided to do it, found a model for it, and got her in December in a dress in my garden in the freezing cold.
That's nice. And so, do you own a lot of the dresses, or do the clients buy them or bring them? How does that work?
I own a lot of the dresses now, but I've built up over time because obviously when I started just doing time for print photo shoots with models. I didn't have anything, so just every shoot I did, I then bought a dress for it and just gradually built it up over time. And then I've made my money back because now I can hire out my dresses. I can use them for photo shoots people pay me for. So I've made my money back, but it took some time to build it up.
Because there's quite a few dresses. I mean, there's quite a few type of dresses. It's different color. Um, And
Yeah,
how does that work for you? Do they have to be a certain height? I'm curious generally about that as well. Like, is there a certain rule? Okay, I am this high. My dresses they only fit this kind of women. Is that how it work, or do you have different
most of my
sizes?
dresses, to be fair, tend to be size sort of 6 to 10, so they are quite small because we use them for workshops as well, and the models we use tend to be very small. But obviously, when I have clients that want to come for a photo shoot, then we just work it out. Because the beautiful thing about photography is, as long as it looks good from the front, it doesn't really matter if it's not completely done up at the back, or if it's got pins holding it, or if it's got a piece of fabric holding it. No one sees that bit, so you can get away with an awful lot with photography.
So how do you pick the colors though? I mean, as we can see slightly in the background of our stream as well, you are quite good at picking the right colors, according to me anyway, and making it crisp. Is that something you do while on set as well, or do you manipulate the colors on Photoshop afterwards?
It's a bit of everything. Like I plan my shoots out a lot. Like I always go into a shoot having the end image already in my head, and then I've just got to work out during the shoot how to get that from here to my computer. So that's why the photography. But yeah, all of my images don't have many colors in. I like to have kind of 3 or 4 colors in my image. I try and do that at the shoot because I don't like fixing editing. But I mean, if I don't have a dress that is that color, then I have to change in Photoshop. But I try to get as much as I can actually in camera, because then it's less work to do in Photoshop. It's just creative editing that I like doing in Photoshop, not fixing editing.
Okay, so would you say then one of your first advice would be if you're gonna add very crisp colors, and we're talking about all kinds of colors, could be green, it could be red, you should try and keep it to 2 to 3 colors and not overdo the amount of colors. Would you agree, or is that kind of what you're saying as well?
I mean, if I can share my screen, I'll try and
Yeah,
just an example of another house.
yeah,
Green.
teach us, princess.
Uh,
I'll put it on the stream right here. You can minimize and
I can't see what I'm doing.
put on your images.
I've got to work out which one it is.
Take your time.
Yeah, here we go. Right. Okay. I've got that up now. Tell me if you can see it okay.
Yep, we see it pretty crispy.
Okay. So the picture on the left is what I had in reality. So I had this blue dress, I had this headdress, which was red and blue. And for me, there's just too many colors in that image. Like, I don't know where my eye is going in that image. It's pretty as it is, a beautiful girl, but my eye just, I don't know, it jars for me. Like, there's just too many colors, too many distractions. Whereas you can see on the image on the right, that's how I edit it in Photoshop. So I brought all of I made everything either purple, blue, green, or gold. And that's a much more peaceful image. I can't really explain why, but when I look at that, I feel a lot more peaceful than when I look at the other image and my eyes being drawn everywhere.
So would you say, are you unconsciously also using like color theory and color wheel when you're trying to make these decisions, or is it more about, okay, these are within the same tertiary colors, they're like blue, purple, they're more or less on the same side, and is that how you make these decisions, or what's the general gist of that process?
I mean, I've studied color theory, but for me, it's always come quite naturally. I just seem to find it quite easy to see colors that work together. I think if a color doesn't work, it just jars, and I can see that it doesn't work. Whereas this, for me, it is sort of colors that are next to each other on the color wheel, so it's very peaceful. And like, for example, I'll try and show you another screen if I may.
Yeah, of course. So it's like a lot of noise in the beginning. Is that because you didn't have the colors accessible, and were you thinking about the colors on the set? Were you already aware of, okay, I'm going to have these colors on Photoshop, or did that happen afterwards?
With that photo shoot, I actually didn't have the right colors. It was straight after lockdown. I just wanted to get out and do a photo shoot because we've been on lockdown for about 3 months. I didn't have the colors that I wanted. I wanted to shoot where these purple flowers were, and so I just had to change it in Photoshop. But I would always try to get things right in camera and actually have the right colors at the time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking at your original image and after, your original image is obviously also very good. So you have like the color, the tone, the not too dark shadows and everything. You're obviously doing a lot of the work correctly the first time, which I think probably makes it easier for you to do your edits, right?
Yeah.
Again, you have 3 lovely pictures here as well, different color palettes.
Yeah, I just always find it interesting how color really affects the mood of an image. So for example, like the middle one is quite peaceful, so it's kind of just natural to me to use those kind of colors if I'm shooting in nature, whereas the one on the right is very striking. It's very cold and quite electric, and it just suits that kind of light painting type shoot. And the one on the left, well, it's the left for me, you know, actually that was a kind of greeny bush, but I just found it interesting to take the color to a completely different color and just give it a really sort of different mood. And I think that's the thing with Photoshop. There's no right or wrong. It's just fun. You can just play and just see what works, see what doesn't work, and just experiment.
And how long have you been doing photography for at this stage?
About 4 or 5 years now.
4 or 5 years. And when did you learn things like composition, color theory, framing, and or even photography for that matter? Was it self-taught, or did you take courses, go to school? How did that work?
When I started, when we wanted to do the wedding photography, we did like a 3-month intensive course with a wedding photographer. So he taught me the very basics, like how to shoot manual mode and how to do sort of basic lighting. And then the rest just came from just shooting and just practicing and just trying. Like I'm not a technical person, like I'm terrible with technical stuff. So I literally learned from just practicing and just experimenting. And I'm a rule breaker as well. So I think it's always good, you know, learn the rules, but then don't be scared to try new things. That's how you learn. Things don't always work, but that's how you learn. If you just try things, and sometimes it works really well if you just break the rules a little bit. So.
Yeah, you have to know what you're breaking and why you're breaking it. So I think it's very interesting to see that your color palette is within the same range. I've noticed on most of the images so far. So you rarely, you can correct me if you have some other examples, which I'm sure you have. You rarely go to the opposite side because that would create too much contrast, I'm guessing, for you. So you try and keep it within a more pleasant view, so it's not catching too much attention. But you have examples where you have some brighter colors, like in the background image we're using. You have the one in the middle with the pink. You know, there's a certain contrast in color there. Do you tone down some of the saturation of colors if there's too much on the other color wheel, or do you keep it as its original saturation? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I play a lot again with color in Photoshop. Even if I like what I've got in my raw file, I still do play a lot in Photoshop with tones and, you know, just human saturation. There's so much you can do. You can completely change a color if you want to. So I don't know. I just like to play.
That's good. So a lot of your process is very intuitive, would you say, right? It's more about, okay, you have a file, you have an image, and you're like, okay, you have a general idea. Okay, maybe I wanted to try this color and so on, but you want to slide a little bit to kind of figure out, okay, did I miss something that you haven't thought about? Would you say that's kind of the process you are at right now?
Yeah, when I'm editing in Photoshop, I actually enjoy the editing process. So I can easily spend quite a long time editing. I don't need to, but that's my preference. Like if I have an evening, I just put a film on, I sit with Photoshop and I just play, and it is just playing for me. And I just keep going until it works. Like it just visually works for me, and at that point, I'm happy with it, and that's the point I stop.
Yeah, makes sense.
And you know, like there's some tricks in Photoshop that can just change photos so dramatically, and I just love playing around and seeing what you can do.
And how do you decide the props? Because I've seen some of your original images in one of your courses. You're showing on the sales page before and after and stuff like that as well. And I think on YouTube I also saw something when I was researching part of your background, and I saw the one with, I think it was the one with wings or something, right?
Yeah, I can show you that one if you want. If I can share my screen.
Let me just add it back.
Hang on, let me just find it first. Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously you can see the original. Again, you have a very good base layer foundation on your photography. I've noticed, you know, you're so I can see there's only one light on the original on this image. Do you normally use only one light, and you use a lot of natural lighting because you're often outside? Do you fake anything outside or inside, like with the reflectors or blockers or anything like that?
When I shoot outside, I normally use one light, and it's more just a practical reason. So I'm a 5'1" girl, and like I've got dresses to carry, I've got a camera bag to carry, I've got lighting to carry, so I just can't carry a whole lighting set with me. So I just out of habit do use one light only. And I suppose I've just got used to shooting like that, and I find that simple setup works for me. It works for my editing. I just try and get the best raw file I can with the most information. I'm always conscious if I'm clipping highlights, clipping shadows, because the more I've got in my raw file, the more I can play with in Photoshop afterwards. I mean, I kind of completely changed the lighting and the mood in Photoshop, but I've got enough information to work with in Photoshop if I get the raw file right.
So your thought process and your workflow, based on what I understand so far, is you're thinking more about values when you take your photos, that you have the information you need, and then you kind of you know almost for sure it might look different in Photoshop because you're going to be adding wings and maybe changing it to warmer color, because you can see obviously the one on the left is more, it's not as orange. On the right one you have obviously added more. What's that process like, and how do you even know that this image would look good with wings? Why not something else? Like, how do you make that decision?
But this was from a workshop we ran called Copper Flame, and it was a Phoenix inspired workshop. So this was the demonstration image I took on the workshop. So I had this idea of trying to make her into the Phoenix in post-production. And so again, I just played. I just found some wing overlays online. I added them in. I had to do a lot of manipulation to them because they didn't look very natural. Added loads of fire, loads of smoke, loads of light rays. I like working with overlays in Photoshop. And again, just played around. I mean, I don't normally do this much Photoshop in terms of like adding stuff. I don't really composite or composite. So this was just kind of an experiment for me, for myself.
So that leads us to the question we had a bit earlier while we were talking from Turkey Master, one of our loyal viewers. What do you use Photoshop in general? Is it just color grading, or do you do other stuff as well, like adding and compositing things over the main photograph? I guess you do a little bit of everything, or
yeah, I don't really do much compositing. I try very hard to get everything right in camera and get everything there in camera. I only really composite if, for example, like here where I've not got fire wings, so I had to find those on the internet and add them in. I do add overlays. Like I enjoy using overlays because I think they give atmosphere and sort of that fairy tale look to photos. So, and they can add light and things like that, which I enjoy doing. But yeah, mainly in Photoshop. It's not just color grading. I do a lot of, with light, and I love curves. I work with curves a lot in Photoshop. And also you can tweak things like composition. If you haven't got the composition quite right, you can expand or you can crop. So
I think you did something on this, right? You made it because the windows aren't that tall anymore, right? So you did something something with the image. You made her taller as well, I think. Or something.
Yeah, I actually made two images because I took two shots and I put them together. You can see I've got a video on YouTube actually showing how I did it. And just putting two photos together, and then but yeah, I like using expansion to make the model look a bit taller, and just also because it was very rectangular once I'd added two photos together, so I had to like expand it to the sides to make it a bit more natural. So yeah, I did play a lot with it.
So how many pictures do you take when you're doing photography? Because you said you want to avoid fixing your images. That suggests to me that you might be spending some time trying to make sure your composition and framing is correct the first time around, rather than thinking, oh, I'll just fix it in post. How's that process? How much time do you spend doing that? And how many photos do you normally take before you're like, okay, I've got the shots I need?
If I can do a very quick photo shoot. Normally if I do like a 2-hour shoot, I'll probably take about 250 images. So I don't know if that's a lot or not very many, but I prefer to kind of spend time with the model, getting the pose right, getting the look right, and then take one shot rather than just snapping away and hoping I get something. Like I've got that image up here in my head, so I want to spend time working with the model, get her position right. Especially if we're doing things like throwing fabric. I love throwing fabric and throwing dresses. I mean, that takes a bit more time. You never quite know how the fabric's going to land, how the dress is going to fall, so you have to take a few more shots from that. But I think setting up the shot is really important. Spending more time setting up the shot and taking one really good shot than snapping away and just praying you get something. That's not a great strategy, I don't think.
No, I think it sounds like you're spending enough time to think and plan before you do something. Like there's a certain process involved. It's not just let's find it out on the set. It's your time is valuable and your client's time is valuable. So you obviously using your experience, of course, in this case, to kind of make that decision on, okay, we're gonna have this color, but I might edit it later, and it's gonna be backlight, front light, which obviously takes a little bit of skill, because if you have less light, fake lights, reflectors, and you don't have all of those other fancy tools, it obviously takes a bit more time and skill for you to practice that kind of photography, because you're also limited. But again, I think you are obviously also very skilled in Photoshop, right? And the process between taking the photo to the Photoshop, how many hours do you think you would spend on like delivering a client work, basically?
If I'm delivering an image for a client, I try and spend half an hour in Photoshop because I just don't have that much time to to spend. But if I'm editing an image for myself, I like to play. I can spend easily like 3 hours on an image if I'm just doing it for myself as something for a portfolio. But yeah, for a client, I try and keep it to 30 minutes, maximum an hour, just because if I'm handing over like 8 photos, that's a long time to be spending in Photoshop after the shoot.
That's
I don't
true.
charge that much for my photo shoots. So.
So, not to get too technical, but do you have one lens, two lens, different lenses? Let's talk a little bit about that.
My lens of choice is the 85mm 1.2 Canon. I use that pretty much all the time. The only time I don't use it is if there's a lot of movement going on or I need the zoom. But yeah, it's 85mm 1.2 is my lens of
And
my.
that's like a recommended lens that you would say for portrait photography or full body photography.
I use it for full body photography, but it is a portrait lens more. I think a 3/4 length is probably the ideal for that, or even closer in. But yeah, I use the 85mm for everything. I break the rules. You know, even if there is movement, I sometimes use my 85mm. It's just awkward because it hasn't got a zoom, so you do have to move a lot and run around a lot.
But that's not always a negative thing, I've heard, right? It's there's a certain pros. I understand anyway that there's a certain pro with the fixed lenses, that way you move rather than having a zoom lens. So you have one lens that you use more or less. You have one light that you use more or less. You
Yeah.
take. I mean, it's quite impressive. I mean, the images you do are obviously elevated. The base images are obviously good, and then you obviously add corrections or creative input using Photoshop. If you were to give 3 advice to someone who's getting into photography, and according to your experience now, because you've been doing it for a while, and you technically are a specialist in fairytale photography and photoshopping, what would you say like the 3 things someone should know about when you do photography in the way you do it?
I mean, it's not so much just about photography, but as the shoot as a whole, so planning, like getting mood boards, getting a clear view of what you're going to do before you get to the shoot. Because if you're panicking, you're like, oh, what am I doing? You know, the model's not going to be relaxed, or your client's not going to be relaxed. If you know what you're going to do, you've already thought about the lighting, it's very easy to then shoot and work with the client and get good results. So planning is one thing. I say breaking, don't be scared to break the rules as a second one. You know, learn the basics, learn how to shoot in manual mode, know how to get good exposure, but then experiment. You know, take the safe shots in the first half of the shoot, so you've got something you can give that's concrete. But then it's because I think sometimes you get some best work when you try something new and you try something different. Otherwise, you're just the same as everyone else.
Right, that's good. And when you do this kind of work and you're doing your photography and photoshopping, um, how should we ask this? You have the camera and you know kind of what you're doing, and you're trying to decide the lighting. And outside lighting is obviously, it's not always on your side because you don't control the outside. It can be cloudy suddenly. It can be too bright light. How do you navigate that kind of situation? You know, it's a known issue in cinematography. It's a known issue in photography. How do you deal with those kind of challenges?
Well, that's why I personally love to shoot with an off-camera flash. I really don't like shooting natural light. I have to sometimes because on the workshops I have to shoot natural light, but it's not my choice. If I do my own shoot, I always have my off-camera flash because I feel like I can then control the light. And when I shoot natural light, I feel like in post-production, I'm always just trying to put in that kind of glow that the flash gives. And so I spend a lot of time that I don't need to if I just use a flash and I get that glow in camera. So yeah, I feel pretty confident. If I've got enough camera flash, I feel like I control the light. It doesn't matter what the light's like outside. I can control it. I mean, I'm shooting in kind of daylight most of the time. Early evening is my sort of favorite time to shoot. So it's not difficult lighting.
Okay, so you have one light that's normally standing, and then you have a flashlight on the camera, which goes on, and do you have that offhand flashlight somewhere else placed? So is it the same one?
I just have an off-camera flash, that's all. So I'm just shooting, and I've got my flash usually at sort of 45 degrees to a model, and that's where I work.
And how do you make sure, is it a certain, do you have fixed intensity all the time that you know works, or do you pay attention to the sky, or if it's cloudy and then you adjust accordingly, but it's always 45 degree?
Not always 45 degrees, sometimes close to me, sometimes 45 degrees, but that's kind of my sort of starting point. And I don't know, in terms of settings, I usually start around like 1/8, 1/16, and then I just take a picture, see what it's like, and then adjust it if I need to. Like it's a sunny day, I'll power up the flash. If it's getting dark, then I'll have the flash a lot more subtle so that it's... I don't like that effect with the flash when the model is really bright and then the background is really dark and there's a massive contrast. I like an effect where it's all kind of even. So I kind of get my settings right without the flash, and then I just add the flash. It's kind of almost like a small fill, really. I don't rely on my flash as like a huge power light. If that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So moving over to Photoshop a little bit, because when you're in Photoshop and you're trying to figure out the color, the tone, do you ever try and manipulate the light of the images? Because I understand Photoshop has advanced enough to allow with some additional manipulation, or do you still respect the fact that you took a photo with this angle, this intensity, this direction of light, or would you go in and use, like, I don't know, a highlight brush or darken brush to kind of accentuate something? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I still massively manipulate in Photoshop. Even if I like what I got in camera, I still play a lot with curves to adjust light and luminosity. I love luminosity blending mode when I'm editing in Photoshop. I also play with like light rays, add light rays and things like that. And you can add light effects just by, using a brush stroke and making it bigger and changing the blending mode. So I play a lot as well. But yeah, I try and get it right in camera, but then I just try and create more mood in Photoshop.
And you also have normally makeup artists before, I think. How do you make that decision as well? Like, because that would affect, I am assuming, somehow the color and the lighting a bit. Is that a process you have to consider? It doesn't matter, or you just make a decision on set that this is the makeup we're going for, or what's the challenges that comes with that?
Again, I think it comes down from the planning. Like if I'm doing my own shoots or we have a workshop, then we definitely have a makeup artist. So we kind of plan out what the looks are going to be. When I work with clients, I offer them the opportunity to have a makeup artist. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I work both ways. But I think having a makeup artist is really valuable because it's the thing I like most about it is I love the energy of when you've got other creatives working on a project with you. You can ask them their view, what they think, they come up with ideas that you haven't had, and you just kind of bounce off each other and you can get a much better effect, I think, when it's just you planning everything. But equally, having a makeup artist, having good skin, good color, nice, accurate makeup obviously saves a lot of time in post-production, fixing stuff. So it's a real blessing to have a makeup artist.
And when you do all of these type of post-processing and tweaks, how much percentage would you say you keep the original image? Because I mean, there's a certain level where you might feel it's too much post-processing. Do you ever feel that, or would you say, okay, now it's starting to look too photoshopped, or do you don't pay attention to it because your intention is to be creative and expressive and kind of change it to be magical?
Yeah, I think for me, there's no limit. Like I do Photoshop a lot in my images because I enjoy the whole process. I suppose, I at the moment with Enchanted Evermore that we run photography workshops with, we actually have a downloads page where I give out my raw files for photographers to edit. So I have no problem with my raw files, but I love the creativity side and I love seeing what I can do in Photoshop as well. It's just kind of creating a story in Photoshop.
So what's 3 useful tools in Photoshop that you always use and you think it's very useful for someone to use? Because a lot of the because when we take screenshot in our digital world like games and stuff, we take screenshot. We normally use Photoshop, Lightroom, or DaVinci Resolve to do the color grading and tweaks. But most people, they probably start with, I would guess, Photoshop actually to do the grading and kind of tweak the images, unless they know how to do it inside the tool itself. So what would you say have helped you? Because there's a lot of connection between the tools used in Photoshop to, tweak the image, fine tune it, contrast, color balance, maybe stuff like that. So what would you say are three tools that is like go to that everyone should know to use and understand?
I think curves. Curves I
Curves.
use so much in Photoshop for virtually everything. I've got a curves layer involved. So curves, blending modes are really powerful. You can do so much with different blending modes. And then probably things like liquify, because you can just enhance. Like, I don't use liquify to like make people really skinny, but you can use liquify to just really enhance shape in an image. Like, I used to be a ballet dancer, so shape for me is really important because my whole childhood was about shape and lines. And so when I have a model, like I try and get it in camera, but if the model hasn't quite got the look that I wanted, then I can just emphasize it with liquify in Photoshop and make it more exaggerated and more effective.
And how does that work for you? Do you feel that, is it very noticeable, do you feel, or is it only noticeable if someone sees the raw image? How big is that edit, type of edit?
It's quite dramatic. Like, I don't think anyone would notice it if they hadn't seen the raw image, but if they saw the raw image, then there would be quite a big difference. I just like making everything bigger with liquify. Hair bigger, dress bigger, shape more pronounced, and just more exaggerated.
So let's talk a little bit about curves because it's definitely something people should learn a little bit more about. How would you explain the purpose of the curve, and if someone were to go into Photoshop and start messing around with the curves, how would you kind of explain or pass on that knowledge on how to use curves basically?
And curves is just a really easy way to change light and color. I rarely use the curves for color. It doesn't work for me. I find it very difficult, but I use the RGB curve. And it's just great to give a stylized look to your photos. So you can add contrast very easily. You can then change the opacity layer if it's too strong. You can create sort of that matte effect very easily with curves. You can correct things. If something in the background is the wrong light and it's distracting, you can just add a curves layer and do layers of masking just to target that particular sort of area. That's why I love Photoshop. I do use Lightroom as well, but I use Lightroom for like a global edit at the beginning. But then in Photoshop, I do all my 99% of my edit in Photoshop because of the masking function. The layers of masking is so powerful. So.
All right, so you touch both tools, but Lightroom is more for like color balance and grading maybe, and then you go to Photoshop to actually do the tweaks.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some tools involved to learn for someone to really, edit the images and kind of get the look they want. Did you have some more images that you wanted to show, by the way? Because I don't know if we rushed through them or if we skipped something.
I can show you.
It's always good for people to see, especially if the new people are joining now. They don't know.
This was an example of just where I had a play for myself. This is kind of a challenge I set myself, because you can see the original photo on the left. And I just took that as a behind the scenes during my workshop. So the lighting is really bad in that image. It's just, I didn't have any control where I was stood, what the lighting was. But I just had a creative evening and I was like, I just want to make something out of this and see how much I can do in Photoshop. So I just got overlays. And I don't normally do this much Photoshop, but I think it's good to do that sometimes just to challenge yourself, because you learn so much when you try new things, and it doesn't always work. And I wish I'd done this a bit more carefully, but I still like the end result, and it taught me a lot doing this. And you can see here I added a lot of overlays, I played a lot with color, and I actually quite like the end result from this.
So obviously you added a lot of new stuff into the image at the ground level anyway, at the floor or whatever. Is that like, do you find images online and then kind of, paste them over and edit them together and then, blur them a little bit maybe? I don't know. And what's the process between that? And again, did you know you were going to do it, or was it more of a looking at the image and then browsing the internet and going, this might actually work on her?
Yeah, but for this image, it was the latter. I had no idea when I was at the workshop and I took the shot that I was going to do this edit. And also, I kind of rushed this. I just kind of found the first overlay that I came across and used it. And in a way, I wish I'd sort of spent a bit more time. I hadn't thought this was going to work. I just sort of did it as an exercise for myself. But, you can get so much online for free. You can find overlays. You can just experiment with them. Just try. And if you use color with it, color grading with it, you can create quite interesting effects. Like I added the brown at the top of the image, whereas it was, there was that dark space in the original image, which I didn't like. So I just added an overlay and then color graded that with sort of the brown image. But again, with the color theme, there's only really 3 colors in this image. And that's how I like to work.
Yeah, it seems like it works very well to have like 2-3 colors, but they're like within the same sphere of color tone, I guess. And how do you make that decision? Why would you go warm color? Because it's outside and you want it to be earthly. Is that why you went for warm color, or did you try any other color at all? Or
for this, I just wanted to keep it to the kind of earth. Trees for me are green and brown, so that's was the natural color to keep it to for this image.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I've got anything else exciting to share.
Everything exciting. You could pull up your Instagram as well if you want to. Get some people to follow.
This was one I did recently, which I did this in my back garden, so I was literally up the top of a 6-foot ladder. So my husband did a load of gardening, cut down loads of trees. So I literally put all the branches on the floor, got the model to lie down in it, and here I played a lot with color because obviously you can see the original of the girl's dress is green. And just when I was editing, like I hadn't planned to change the dress to blue, but there was just too much green going on, so I did choose to make the dress blue for this image. And I felt her hand was too big as well, so I did add a hair overlay. Just to kind of get rid of that distracting big hand.
Because it was catching a bit of the attention, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's because that was one of my questions when I was looking at your Instagram was, okay, you have a lot of outside shots, but if they're wearing green color or blue color or something, obviously that's going to be distracting. Because they're matching the background too much, right? They're part of the environment rather than standing out a little bit. But you do have some shots like in the Instagram you're showing. You obviously have incidents where they have more or less the same color, like green background, green foreground, where there's a different saturation level, obviously, between them. And you also have certain shots that use depth of field or blurring. So do your camera use depth of field, or is it something you add afterwards in Photoshop?
Well, with the Canon 1.2, I usually shoot about 1.6 aperture, so I do get, that the blurred background, the blurred foreground, and I always try to shoot through things as well, so if I'm trying to find an example here, I don't think like here, you can see I've kind of got stuff blurred out in the foreground, and I love that 3D look. So you've got the model in the middle, in focus, hopefully, and then you've got a nice blurred background and a nice blurred foreground, and it kind of gives a very 3D look. So, but that lens helps. That lens definitely helps for that. I don't really blur things in post-production, although I do sometimes add like an overlay, but I deliberately shoot through things. Like here, you can see I shot through like a bit of a plant or something to get that kind of blurred feel. And I feel that works for the fairytale photography that I do. It's kind of dreamy.
And I also noticed this more or less women photography of.
Yeah, it is mainly women. I do want to shoot more men, and I plan this year to shoot more men. It's just hard.
Plenty of men. There's plenty of men. You just have to go to the LARP community, the Dungeon and Dragons type of community, because they already have probably, and cosplaying is a big thing. I mean, you could probably enter that market as well, I think, quite easily.
We've got a workshop, a Viking workshop, so we've got 2 male models on that. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be good to shoot. So yeah, I definitely want to do more with men, but it's just hard because I do kind of fairytale theme, and I've got lots of dresses. I've then got to worry about finding costumes for the guys, and
just find guys who do LARPing, role playing, and cosplaying. They already own their own equipment, so you should be good there, I think. But it's different, right? Because if you're looking at your images on Instagram, you can see there's a lot of softness to your images. And traditionally, when you learn photography, it's very common that you learn, okay, for the girls, you make sure it's soft light and soft feeling, and for the guys, you want to accentuate a little bit of the roughness and stuff. What are your thoughts about that kind of traditional photography tips and advice?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I suppose that's probably why I'm sort of nervous as well about shooting men, because I'm so practiced with shooting with women. I would have to change my lighting, I think, to shoot with men and make them look more rugged. I mean, obviously I could do a lot more of that in Photoshop as well, but I think it does take a different kind of lighting technique to shoot men, because they need to look manly and masculine, whereas women can look soft and feminine. So it is a different technique, I think, and it's something I'm going to have to practice myself.
Unless you purposely find men who are comfortable being presented as soft, obviously.
Maybe, but I mean, I suppose as a girl, like I like manly men. So if I was going to shoot a male model, I'd want him to look manly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully, it will be interesting to see how that goes as well, if you do get that opportunity, and see how you deal with it. Because as you said, there's a different challenge in lighting and everything. You had a course too, didn't you?
Yeah, I have a Photoshop course now, so I literally teach my style step by step. So it's called Photoshop Breakthrough Formula. Because
So that's kind of useful.
A long time, like trying to learn editing from YouTube. YouTube's a really great resource, but it does take a lot of time. And the problem with YouTube is you're watching different people's workflows, so you're trying to piece together like A's workflow with B's workflow, and it's hard when you're trying to learn, because you don't know what happened before that, you don't know what they did after that, and it was just hard. So I started then doing some tutorials myself and learning that way, and I found that a much better way to learn personally. And so then I've had people asking me like how I edit, and so I thought finally I did my own tutorial. So
how's that going for you? Is that all right?
Yeah, good. So I enjoy teaching, so I like passing on what I've learned, and I love seeing the results from it. When people edit beautiful images, it's really nice to feel I have like a little part of that.
So would you say your course is most relevant for photographers, or using your style for photography, or do you think anyone would get any use out of it if they do other type of photography?
I think anyone who does portrait photography could benefit from it, because what I use works in any type of portraiture. I mean, all my images and the ones that I used to demonstrate are fine art Fairytale, so I suppose it works well on fine art Fairytale, but I think it will work for any type of photography, really, portraiture at least, people.
What was the hardest thing to learn when you picked up photography? Was it the technical stuff, the creative part, or?
For me, it was the technical stuff, just because I'm terrible. Like, I can spend half an hour like trying to switch my camera on. I mean, like I'm that untechnical. So for me, it was that side. But just practice, you get used to it really easily. It doesn't take long. It's not as complicated, I think, as some people make out. Like I always found when I started out, reading all these forums of people talking about photography was quite off-putting. Whereas if you actually get a camera and you actually practice, it's a lot easier than some people make out, I think.
So when you take your photos from a technical point of view, what are the things you have to make sure is definitely correct?
I think just the exposure triangle. As long as you've got good exposure, that's all you need to do, really, and composition as well. I suppose I've always found composition quite easy. It's come quite naturally to me, I suppose. Not cutting off a model at like a particular limb or something like that, but that's always come quite natural to me. And there are things you can tweak it in Photoshop as well afterwards if you do get it wrong.
Unless you cut them off, then there's no image to put back in, is there? Unless you really use an overlay and fake it, I guess.
I did actually do that once. Actually, I was shooting a model. We were at the sea, and there was these huge waves. Like I was getting so excited by these waves, I cut her hand off, and I was so gutted because it was like an amazing shot. And I was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I cut her hand off." So I had to take her hand from another shot, and then I had to put a wave over it and cheated it.
Which photo was this?
I don't know if I can find it. I'll try and find it on Instagram.
Is it the one? Is that the mermaid stuff?
No.
Because that's the only water stuff I remember.
Find it. It was a long time ago. It's about 2 years ago. I'll have to go that long way down Instagram.
Oh, I just realized when I click on Instagram, there's actually videos and stuff going on of the water lady. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into this. Like a lot of people, when they do photography, you know, they like when I normally do photography, I try and not edit my images too much because I want to see how much I can push it, just you know, without any manipulation and photoshopping. But then at the same time, there's obviously a limit to creativity if you don't go into Photoshop and express yourself, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people don't like a lot of editing, and I think that's fine. That's what I love about photography because it's so open. You know, it's personal choice. You know, some people like a lot of editing, some people don't, and there's no right or wrong. So I think just do what suits you, and do the images you like, create what you like creating, and that's fun.
It's quite a few images you've collected over time.
Yeah, I'll just try and find that. Yeah, it's one of these ones. Maybe I have it. Nope.
Quite a few nice looking photos.
I don't know where that photo is. I don't know where it's going.
How do you make this decision when you're like throwing stuff in the water and location? Do you do like location scouting, or do you just know at this stage where someone would be suitable to take photos, or is that like something you do just figure out as you go?
I do try and do location scouting. I find it hard because I've got 2 young children. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So, and I have such a busy life that getting out and doing location scouting.
Nah, you just drag your kids out, say, hey, we're gonna go play a game, we're gonna find the
It's never
coolest
easy
location.
taking a 2-year-old to a remote location. But yeah, I do try and location scout, and I've just kind of built up a few places that I know I can go that would be nice. Like I'm lucky I've got a park near me that's really nice at different times of the year. It's different. So I've got maybe like 5 key locations that I kind of tend to use.
Okay. So, but location is obviously a very critical part of composition, I would say, right? You want to have a location that works for you, your frame and your story in your case as well, because there's a lot of storytelling in your images, which we haven't really covered a lot about.
And I think as long if you've got a beautiful subject, you've got a beautiful location, that's like half your work is already done for you. So all of you then got to do write it nicely, and you've got a pretty image. So I think it's part of the planning for me. And I think you can use like really simple locations as well. Like I'm really keen to I haven't done this yet, but I'm really keen to create this online membership whereby I teach people how to create, you know, photography in very simple places like just their back garden. And I'll see if I can find an image, because all of these images were shot in my back garden or in my lounge. So all of these images I shot either in my back garden or just in my lounge. So you can do so much on a very cheap budget, just with a bit of planning, and it doesn't cost much. Like I probably spent maybe £20 to set up, you know, buying a few things to set up. Obviously I already had the dresses, so I'm lucky there that I have kind of a collection of dresses. But I mean, can you see my cursor when I'm pointing?
Yeah.
Like here, this is my back garden. That's just a bush in my back garden. I had a gel light that was shooting on that. And then I just put up two stands on either side, and I just hung some leaves it was basically like a backdrop stand, and I hung some leaves that I had in my garden over that, and it's a really easy setup, but it creates quite an interesting effect.
I mean, that's for sure. I mean, when you look around your own neighborhood, you're like, I can't take photos here, and it's too far to go to somewhere that's nice to take photos. And then maybe you skip the whole process of taking photos because you're like, in my case, I live like in London, so it's like I don't necessarily want to take photos of buildings all day long, right? So it definitely is. I think it's probably a useful skill set to kind of understand the thought process of deciding the location and then still being able to take a good shot. I mean.
You know, that bush there is that bush there is that bush there.
Same bush.
You know, if you just change it up, change the styling, change the angle,
change the lady.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, there's a lot involved in your photography, I would say. There's the makeup, there's the costume, there's the location, there is the lighting, there's the making sure that you have, you know, not too complicated color palette to confuse the viewer. Um, so, I mean, there's a lot of skills obviously involved in this, and normally people go to school or courses to pick up all of this. But would you say you said a lot of this comes naturally to you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go on any courses to learn that. I think you can learn a lot just from following other photographers. Just take time. Follow people on Instagram. If you like their work, just look at why you like it. What do they do? What is it that you like about the image? What colors are they using? What lighting are they using? Where are they putting their light? You can kind of tell normally from looking at the picture where the light was positioned, and then just try it yourself and try and give your own twist to it rather than completely copying someone. But that's how you learn. And just experiment.
So when you take photo of these ladies, and what would you say is a no-go, things you should be careful about, in terms of lighting, shape, form, things that you should avoid when you're doing this kind of photography, especially on ladies, right? Because you want the softness, you want obviously not too many colors. So what would you recommend to pay attention to not do?
I don't know about not do, but I think it's nice to make the model or the client feel really comfortable. I think the more comfortable they feel, the more relaxed they feel, then the better the results. Also, showing them sometimes the back of the camera can give them that boost because they feel very vulnerable. They don't know what you're seeing. They're hoping that you're getting something good, and I have to watch that myself because I'm very critical on myself, and sometimes I'm sort of staring at the camera like looking miserable, and then sometimes the model kind of takes that as I'm unhappy with her, which is not the case at all. So I have to I try when I'm doing a shoot to always be quite communicative with the model and encourage her. And if I am unhappy with something, I say it's not working because I'm not happy with the lighting. It's nothing that she's doing. So I think as long as you've got a good rapport going on, then it's a really easy shoot and they relax. And sometimes if they see the picture and they really like it, they're like, oh wow, that's okay. And then they get a kind of new boost of energy and more confidence, and then you get better results.
So
it's good to
communication.
If like personally, like I prefer one side of my face to the other, and a lot of models feel like that. And I think if you ask about insecurities at the beginning, then you make sure you're not sort of playing on someone's insecurities, and you're going to get pictures that they like because you're not shooting from the angle that they don't like, or if they're paranoid about their arms or something like that, then you can sort of do poses which don't show that off. And
So are there any poses though that is recommended for the ladies to do to look better? Because I've stumbled upon suggestions online, at least, that people are like saying, if you do this, you look, I don't know, more like this or that. Is there certain poses that works very well and certain poses that actually makes it look not as good?
Yeah, I think for women it's all about curves and shape. It seems you like pop your hip. For guys it's good to kind of be quite square, because if you're front on and you look quite square, then you look bigger. Whereas if you just kind of angle it and you have like a shoulder up, then you look kind of more feminine, more soft, more gentle. You can emphasize that S curve in the body. Women have got a beautiful shape to their bodies, so just emphasize that as much as possible, so that you're really showing off the female curves. Just be careful if you're doing just you don't get any kind of wrinkles in the hip. You can always put an arm there just to cover it, or in Photoshop you can just liquefy it a little bit. So I think shape is really important for women. And I think just try different things. Sometimes even the unexpected things are the best shot of the day.
That's true. Just try it, and then if it's bad, then no one's gonna know, because you're the one who has the camera anyway, so it's your top secret. But you did mention you sometimes take photos of yourself.
Not in myself really, but I mean, I suppose from being a dancer, like I used to have people take pictures of me, so I've been on the model side of it as well as behind the camera, so I've kind of got experience from that side of it. And curves for me and shape is very important in photography.
Because of your background as well, I guess, ballet dancing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, guys and people watching, I mean, the reason we're talking about all of these things and we're repeating some of the topics in a different angle is to really emphasize the fact that in photography, you have shape languages, you have form languages, you have poses. So when we put in 3D models in our environment, we also want to pay attention to the poses. If it's a female character, you maybe take this information and use it to your advantage, make her look a bit more, feminine, and accentuate the form. And if it's a man, make it a bit square and big. And obviously camera angles we haven't talked too much, because most of the photography has been front faced and some of the photography goes down, but obviously there are also pay attention to that. And the color, I think, is very good information to kind of use her references maybe, and kind of pay attention to how she uses only three colors, and they tend to be within the same side of the color sphere normally. So I think that's good advice too. So all of these things are relevant when even when we do our type of work as well. We want to make sure that color might be actually something people struggle with a lot. I've seen a lot of people who do whatever stuff they do it very great. The values might be correct, and so everything, but then they just get the colors wrong. It's like too red, for example, or it's too bright or something, and all they had to do was kind of desaturate it, tone it down a little bit. And looking at your work, I can see that you're pretty good at that as well, and you don't really have even your red colors of the lady on your Instagram, not too far, and the blue colors, and the green colors, and the pink color, even the yellow colors, they all have. I don't know if you soften it more during your Photoshop or something, but they are more. Dimmed down. They're not like in your face type of color, even though the color is there, but the saturation is different. Is that something you pay attention to because you don't want it to be like popping out too much? Even your pop-up pictures that you were talking about, with the blue ladies, and some of your recent images, I believe, as well, where you have this a bit more um, creative photography with this blue. I'm guessing either you put it in afterwards, or maybe you went all crazy and actually had them move around the light with high exposure and then use it afterwards. But I mean, even those colors aren't really that like super bright, because you are using, a more desaturated costume and background, and then any other more saturated color would actually look, quite bright on its own. Um, all of these techniques, I think, is pretty good, Ruth, the stuff you do. And hopefully we can see some more photos and hear more from you in the future as well. Um, how do people contact you if they want to do your courses, workshop? Because you live in Bournemouth, I think it was.
Yeah, no,
Where
my
I
course is online, so just drop me a message. Like Instagram is probably the best place. RR Photographic. If you want to chat with me about anything.
Yeah, definitely. I think people should be able to contact you and learn a little bit more about you, and even maybe take your Photoshop course. So, do you teach a little bit of color knowledge in your course at all, or?
Yeah, I teach color grading. I actually find color grading very difficult myself. It's the hardest thing for me in Photoshop, but because I find it hard, I do a lot of it, and so I've kind of found ways to play with color a lot. But yeah, I do teach color grading as part of my course.
That makes sense. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, that's why we have color grading expert like these days, right? It's just a lot of people who find it difficult to do it correctly, and it's a trained eye, right? You have to practice a little bit to kind of get an idea over time, and maybe get some feedback on people, how they perceive things, and everything like that. um so yeah, so we already done an hour, unfortunately. So is there any last words, Ruth? Do you want to maybe pull up your Instagram so people can double check and add them? People can stalk you on Instagram. So it's RR Photography. And you have another one as well, which is your workshop one, right?
Yeah, so the workshop is
Clearly you're popular, because I saw you have 50 hearts. I rarely get one. No, just kidding.
interesting.
All
So if you
right.
want a photography workshop in Bournemouth, that's interesting.
And your Photoshop one doesn't involve any physical meetup. It's just online, right?
Yeah, it's just online. For the
Uh, that's probably a good thing in these days, just people who don't want to go out, or lost how to communicate with people because they've been inside for too long. So I want to just say thank you for everyone for watching. If you want us to cover some other topics in the future that you felt we missed, hopefully we didn't miss anything. I think we covered a lot of ground. But if you want us to go more in depth, or if you want us to invite Ruth back, maybe to do a workshop online, that's always possible. You will have to message me and let me know you're interested. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'm just going to talk to Ruth a little bit afterwards in private after I click end stream. But yeah, thank you for watching. Just gonna wave goodbye to everyone and have a nice day and a good weekend, I suppose.